Chapter 5. Anon sat with his back against the cold stone wall, absent-mindedly rolling a small rock between his fingers. Across from him, Kara leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "I grew up here in the capital. My father is an advisor to the king." She sighed. "Sometimes I wish I could get away from all the politics and scheming. Just live a simple life, you know?" Anon tossed the rock aside. "Trust me, life in a poor village isn't as idyllic as it sounds." "No, I'm sure it's hard in its own way," Kara said. She paused, then asked quietly, "Do you mind if I ask? How did you end up as a servant here?" Anon's jaw tightened. Flashes of smoke and blood crept into his mind before he pushed them away. "Let's just say I lost my family and had nowhere else to go." Kara bit her lip. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pried." "It's all right," Anon said, softening. "The Teasers took me in. I owe them a great debt." Kara nodded, and they sat in thoughtful silence. Later that night, Anon lay still, listening to Kara's steady breathing. When he was sure she was asleep, he carefully entered his mind space. He let mana flow from his core along the guidelines provided by the Supreme Manual. Anon continued channeling mana, feeling his control and reserves steadily increasing. The next day, Kara told Anon about the political machinations between the ruling families. Anon listened with rapt attention, gaining insight into this complex society he was now part of. 1 hour took the next, and it was soon night again. Kara fell asleep soon after while Anon meditated and practiced his mana control, slowly increasing his power as he did so. As morning broke, his body felt exhausted but energized at the same time, like a well-rested runner at the starting line of a race. He yawned and stretched, feeling immensely pleased with himself. On the third day, the sound of voices and footsteps echoed down the mine tunnel. Anon tensed, ready to defend Kara if needed. But it was Lord Tesser and his men, their torches flickering off the stone walls. "Kara!" Lord Tesser cried, rushing forward to embrace his daughter. The guards moved to surround Anon, but Kara stopped them. "It's all right. He saved me." She quickly explained what had happened with the assassins. Lord Tesser's face darkened at the news, but he nodded gratefully at Anon. "You have my deepest thanks. I am in your debt." He turned to his captain. "See to it this young man is rewarded." The captain inclined his head. "Of course, my lord." As they made their way out of the mines, Anon kept his head down, maintaining his guise as a humble servant. But he noticed the subtle shift in how the guards treated him. With wariness, yes, but also a newfound respect. Back at the estate, Anon returned to his small room in the servants' quarters. Making sure he was alone, he sat on the edge of his cot and closed his eyes. Once again, he sank into the Supreme Manual, running through the forms and motions carefully. A small smile touched his lips. His power was growing. That night, a soft knock came at Anon's door. He opened it to find Kara, dressed in a plain gray dress and cloak, her hair tucked under a hood. "May I come in?" she whispered. Anon stepped aside, his heart quickening. What was she doing here, and at this late hour? Kara pushed back her hood, her eyes shining in the candlelight. "I wanted to thank you properly for saving my life." "There's no need, my lady," Anon said. "I'm just glad you're safe." Kara shook her head. Don't be so formal. Not when we're alone. She smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. After all, we did spend nearly 3 days trapped in a mine together. I'd say that warrants some familiarity, wouldn't you? Anon chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. I suppose you're right. He paused, suddenly nervous. Why are you really here, Kara? Kara stepped closer, her gaze holding his. Must I spell it out for you? She whispered. Very well then. She took his hands in hers. I've developed feelings for you, Anon. I know it's foolish. You're just a servant, and I'm a noblewoman. But I can't help myself. Anon stared at her, his heart pounding. He had felt a growing affection for Kara too, but never dared hope it could be reciprocated. Now here she was, confessing her feelings for him. He smiled, squeezing her hands gently. Then it seems we're both fools, he said softly. Kara's eyes widened. Then she laughed in delight and threw her arms around his neck. Anon held her close, breathing in her scent. After a few moments, Kara pulled back to look at him seriously. This won't be easy, you know. My family would never approve. I know, Anon said, but we'll find a way. As long as we're together, that's all that matters. Kara smiled, cupping his cheek in her hand. My brave, foolish hero. She leaned in, her lips brushing his in a feather-soft kiss. Anon's heart soared. Together, he and Kara could face any challenge. Of that, he was sure. Anon and Kara parted, still holding hands. I should go before someone sees us, Kara said reluctantly. When will I see you again? Anon asked. He didn't want to let go of her hand. Tomorrow night, meet me in the gardens at midnight, Kara said. We can talk more then. Anon nodded. Until tomorrow. Kara gave his hand one last squeeze before slipping away into the shadows. Anon leaned back against the wall, smiling like a fool in love, which he supposed he was. The next evening, Anon made his way to the gardens under cover of darkness. Kara was already there, sitting on a stone bench bathed in moonlight. She stood up when she saw him, hurrying over to throw her arms around his neck once more. I've been thinking of nothing else but you all day, she whispered against his chest. And you, Anon murmured, stroking her hair. Kara looked up at him, her expression turning serious. There's something I must ask you, Anon. If you and I are to have a future together, would you consider leaving your position as a servant? Anon blinked in surprise. Leave my position? But where would I go? What would I do? You could come live with my family, Kara said earnestly. I would vouch for you. Tell them you saved my life and have proven yourself. You could train to become a knight in my father's service. We could be together openly. Anon was stunned. To leave behind his life as a servant, to have a real future with Kara... It was almost too good to be true. Do you truly think your family would accept me so easily? He asked cautiously. They may see it as you sullying yourself with a mere servant. They care for my happiness above all else, Kara insisted. And if I tell them you're the only one who can make me happy, they will come around. All I ask is that you consider it, Anon, for us. Anon gazed down at her earnest face and felt his resolve weakening. To be with Kara as an equal, to have a real future together, he wanted it more than anything. "I will consider it," he said at last. Kara smiled in delight, throwing her arms around him once more. "That's all I ask." Anon held her close, wondering if he was being foolishly optimistic. But if there was even a chance of being with Kara openly, recognized as the man who had won her heart, he had to take it. The future was unclear, but one thing was certain. He would do anything for her. Their fate was now tied together, come what may. Anon pulled back slightly to look into Kara's eyes. "We should be cautious," he said softly. "If anyone were to see us like this." Kara nodded, though reluctance shone in her gaze. "You're right. We can't be open about our feelings yet. Not until I've spoken to my family." They separated, the air suddenly feeling colder between them. Anon immediately missed her warmth and closeness. How long would they have to hide their growing bond? This is the end of chapter 5.